So welcome back. In the example we just gave in the previous video of how the melee system works, we just kept it quite simple just to show the core mechanics. But before we go, just wanted to touch quite briefly on some of the strategies available had this have been a full game.
Okay.
So first thing that we didn't really cover was that Doug the Flatulent actually has a 3-inch melee range, whereas Flintlock only has a 1-inch melee range.
That's quite a difference.
It's quite a big bonus to have the larger melee range because, say, Doug had stood about there, he's within his 3-inch range, but Flintlock is outside of his 1-inch range. Combat would have taken place as normal, but Flintlock couldn't possibly do any damage. If you imagine him kind of chopping with his little daggery thing, but he's too far away.
Okay.
Whereas,
so going back to that example, then, if he can't engage in combat, would Flintlock still be flipping cards?
He would still be He would still be taking part in the melee. He'd still be drawing a card. He'd still be choosing a card. But any damage he would deal would go to nil.
Right.
So he'd be choosing cards like High Guard, Sweeping Cut. Like the Sweeping Cut he did, it would have still reduced your thrust to nothing. But I couldn't have then dealt damage back to you because I'd be out of range.
That makes sense.
So there's a big advantage if you've got a longer range in standing at your long range and poking people with a long stick so they can't get you back. To slightly tempt Doug, he does have a charge ability where he'll get extra damage if he moves directly towards, which would have brought him into base contact.
Is that something special for Doug alone? Or?
It is, yeah. It's one of Doug's active abilities.
Right.
So,
we mentioned that in the previous video.
Yeah, so it's special just to him. Everyone's got various different abilities. But let's say Doug is cautious, he doesn't want to charge, he doesn't want to get his extra damage bonus, he wants to kind of saunter up and start poking Flintlock at a safe distance.
Like you would a sleeping bear.
Quite. It's quite.
I don't know where that came from.
It's a sensible. Why did I bring you along? It's quite a sensible mode of attack. But Flintlock isn't completely powerless. This isn't one of those games where when it's not your turn you've got nothing to do. Moonstone includes a rule called reaction steps. Okay. So at the end of each enemy action, such as when Doug moved in, ready to make his poke attack, any opponent player, such as me, can make one reaction step, which is a step action, which costs 1 energy with one of my characters. So if he were to do this, and Flintlock has still got 2 energy on his card, I could discard 1 of my energy to simply step back out of his melee range.
Right.
Doug may then...
So a reaction step then is, like you mentioned, it's like a step that you can do in your turn.
Exactly.
But you're doing it in an opponent's turn.
Exactly right.
And is there a limit to that? I mean, we've mentioned before that you can play 3-4 players. Is it only opponent players' turn?
Each opponent player can choose 1 character that they control to make 1 reaction step, if they wish.
So if I had, just for argument's sake, if I had 3 models and you had 1 and you were moving, I could only choose to react with 1 of them, not all 3.
Exactly right. So if you were to charge them in amongst a whole crowd of people all belonging to me, I couldn't possibly get them all 3 in time.
Right.
So in situations like this, you might find that little chase scene ensues because Doug might spend his next action moving back into 3 inches again, and then I spend my energy moving back out. And he spends another energy moving back in. And I've run out of energy.
Oh no!
But Doug's still got 1 left, and then he finally gets his melee attack.
Aha!
Situations like that can occur. Other situations that might occur is Doug might move in to be just outside of my melee range, and I may be bold. And rather than trying to step away, I might have spent my energy to step on in.
Oh!
So... I'm committing to the attack, you're coming towards me, I'm up for it. By stepping in, I've allowed myself the ability to deal damage back to you during the round of combat. So, that's reaction steps. There's a lot more to them. You can react to any enemy action. So if someone were to move around a corner with a crossbow and you think their next attack might be to shoot you with it, you might do a reaction step to step behind a barrier, for example. There's quite a lot that can be done with them. They're quite a lot of fun.
Now, Tom, if I remember earlier on in an earlier video, I forget which one, sorry, but we mentioned there were 7 types of actions. So we had steps, jogs, traversing, melee attacks, active abilities, arcane ability, and harvests. Can you react to every single one of them?
You can react to every single one of them. They are all actions, and every action can be reacted to by one character, provided they've got the energy remaining on them. Once a character has expended all their energy, they're obviously unable to do this action, this special out-of-turn action, and they are quite vulnerable.
Right.
So activation order has that extra little twist to it. Sometimes you want to activate first to get to the stone before the opponent gets to it. Sometimes you want to be more cautious and keep the energy on your characters. Perhaps even activate with a character but keep some energy back so that you can react with it.
I see.
Particularly a tactic of fairies who have lots of energy but are very fragile. They want to keep their energy on them so that they can react to the opponent.
Yes.
Which makes them a bit more of a thinking kind of game.
Yes, hard to pin down.
Hard to pin down, yeah. So, another rule I wanted to quickly mention, again we won't go into all the detail on it because it's a fairly deep area of the game, is that every character has their own signature move, which is on the back of their character card. And the way signature moves work is they are upgrades to regular combat moves.
I see.
So Flintlock's signature move, for example, is an upgrade for the High Guard. So if Flintlock's taking engaged in a round of melee and he chooses a High Guard, after cards are revealed, he can choose to declare that he's upgrading to his signature move, which is called Tactical Retreat.
Does he have to upgrade?
No, he doesn't have to.
Okay.
Sometimes they're generally advantageous, but not always. Sometimes they come with penalties as well as advantages.
Makes sense, okay.
So in the case of Flintlock's, we'll put it up on screen now, Flintlock's signature move is Tactical Retreat. It's very similar to a High Guard. He loses the ability to do his follow-up attack, because obviously he's getting the hell out of there. But it reduces the incoming damage by -1.
That's good.
And he gets to make a 2-inch move afterwards.
Ah.
So one thing you might do, if someone's bearing down on you, deliberately play that signature move High Guard. You'll probably get hit on the way out, but it's at -1 damage, and then you leg it. Every character in the game has a different signature move, and knowing your character's signature move is kind of just as interesting and important in what they can do as knowing the abilities on the front of the
While on
card.
the subject, could you tell me about Doug's signature move?
Sure. Doug's signature move is Ankle Biter. This is a ability which is limited to only 1-inch range, so when he's at his longer range he can poke with his stick, but if he does get in close, then the pug can attack.
Nice.
And it does extra damage, and it's impact damage rather than piercing damage, which is what he normally does with his lance. So depending on the armour that your opponent's wearing, it may be advantageous, it may not be.
Okay.
So that's signature moves. We might have mentioned in the previous video that close combat can at times feel like a more advanced version of rock, paper, scissors, because
I always lost at that game.
So you always win at this game, though.
Yes, I do.
Which is strange. So some cards will both deal damage to one another, whereas other cards will clearly have an advantage. And there's only 6 cards, so within a couple of rounds of melee, you'll understand which cards beat which cards. If you use your signature move extensively, you're kind of telegraphing your card. You know, it's like if someone always plays stone in rock, paper, scissors. You know how to counter them. Paper, yeah. Well done. I thought you said you always lose.
Well,
it was a lie.
I never lie. I'm just very generous with the truth.
And your inches. So they are powerful, the signature moves, but it's one bit of information that you're now handing over to your opponent about what you might play. There are other ways you can determine what your opponent might play.
Okay. Well, what are these?
For example, there's only 6 possible combat moves. You know that an attacker is very unlikely to charge in and do a very defensive move.
Yes.
Moves like
Why would you do that? That'd be weird.
Be stupid, wouldn't
Yeah,
it?
just run in there and go, no, I'm not going to attack you. I'm going to stand back and shield.
Because they've spent an energy for this attack and then chosen a card which is deliberately designed to do minimal damage to both players. They won't do it.
Unless they're very, very weird.
So you can start to narrow down, of the 6 available cards, what your opponent might play. If your opponent is very low on wounds and you're attacking them, they're very unlikely to play some of the more aggressive cards, because the aggressive cards deal a lot of damage but also suffer a lot of damage.
Yes.
So again, you can narrow down what you think they're likely to play. Another factor you can use in trying to work out what your opponent might play, you don't have to, you can just pick randomly if you want, and in your first few games, go for it. It's no different from a game where you're rolling dice to see who wins. But as you start to become familiar with the way the game works, you'll start to make some pretty good guesses about what your opponent might play. And another way that you can do that is by looking at any buffs and bonuses that characters have for certain damage types. So Flintlock, for example, has a dagger ability which increases piercing combat damage dealt by +1. What that means is if he plays a melee move, a melee card, which has the damage type of piercing, which is
like a thrust, for example.
Like a thrust, or a rising attack, then he does +1 damage.
Right.
So obviously, as the Flintlock player, I'm looking for those cards. But as my opponent, Richie knows that I'm probably looking for those cards.
Yeah.
And can take action accordingly.
And likewise, sorry to interrupt, but I noticed looking at Doug, I can see his lance cannot deal slicing damage.
Exactly.
So therefore, you are extremely unlikely, if you're playing with Doug, to ever pick something with the slicing characteristic.
Quite right. Unless you're being very clever and deliberately deliberately leading your opponent into a false conclusion. And finally, a factor that is often overlooked is your own hand. It's a very small deck. There's only 3 of each card. If you've got 2 of them, the chances of your opponent having the 3rd one is quite small.
And if you've got 3 of them...
If you've got 3 of them, you know for damn certain your opponent doesn't have that card. So you can play the card which is good against it.
For argument's sake, if you had 3 high guards...
If I had 3 high guards, then I would know that you couldn't possibly play a high guard. So my falling swing is going to come through completely unanswered and chop your head off.
Of course, this is relying on random chance. You may have the 3 high guards, but not have the falling swing.
Yeah, that's right. It can happen, and that's very frustrating if it does. But anyway, you don't necessarily, as a new player, have to concern yourself with all of those factors. I just wanted to mention that they are there. Where if you start exploring the game, you will find the depth. But it does work absolutely fine straight out the box if you just effectively choose a card that you like the sound of. Do you feel aggressive? Do you feel defensive? Stick it down, see whether you're the winner. But if you want to get a bit more clever, the game will support it. So that's all we are going to cover, is that right?
I believe so.
Yeah, so don't forget we've got a Kickstarter either coming up or currently live, depending on when you're watching this video. So, or maybe it's over and we're millionaires living on the Bahamas. I don't know. So,
I'm at Disneyland.
So, if the Kickstarter is live, go and back it right now. Otherwise, sorry you missed out, etc., etc. Take care. Bye bye.
Bye bye.